Hello, good day. This will be the third tutorial of getting to know Maya. For the previous video, I basically mentioned about the polygon primitives. As you may have remembered, these are actually the building blocks or maybe the foundation to then model your items in Maya itself. And today I'm going to talk about adding subdivision. Basically, I'm adding extra edges and faces on the polygon, and also I'll be manipulating the three components that I previously mentioned, which are the vertices, edges, and faces. Okay, and I will talk about extruding, as you may see over here, the icon, and duplicating your polygons. All right. Okay, so let's start out with adding subdivision for your polygon. Okay, for every polygon primitives that you create on the scene, they have their own set of subdivision that we can modify. Okay, let me just create a few polygons here. Okay, for the pyramid, and this will be the pipe. All right, 2, 3. Okay, as you may know, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 polygon primitive on screen. Let's start with the first one. The first icon here would be the sphere. Alright, this may be a little bit distracting. Let me delete the rest. Alright, for the sphere itself, we can see it has its own set of number of faces. And if you want to add more or reduce the number of edges or faces of this sphere itself, to your right under the channel box under inputs, if we open this up, we can actually see the subdivision axis and height. Radius basically control how big is the radius of the sphere, but of course radius, I mean, if you want to increase the size, and from the first class itself, regarding about navigation, we can actually scale the tree value, as you can see. Okay, how do I actually move it without relying on the tools over here? Basically, I just mouse over, click on the radius, and middle mouse drag left or right. Okay, you can do that for the rest of the translation value. You can move up or down, or the rotation and scaling, of course. All right, just select one of the attributes and middle mouse drag left or right. Okay, so now let's see, subdivision axis 20, height is 20. Axis actually refers to, as you can see, the axis around the sphere. Okay, I'm adding around 50. I can actually decrease the number of axis. As you may have noticed, the lesser the number on the axis, the sharper the edge of your sphere will be. It becomes sharper in the end. All right, so if you add more, the more edges you have or more faces, more smoother your polygon will be. Same goes for the subdivision height. The higher it goes, the more smoother your polygon will be. So in a nutshell, right, I mean, I will talk more about the smoothness maybe in a few classes, okay? Because if you want to create something which is very curvy, you need to have more subdivision or edges and faces. For the time being, let's just reduce this by 20 by 20. You can actually limit how many edges and faces you want for the sphere, okay, before we can actually manipulate the shape itself or maybe drag the vertices or faces. Okay, this is for sphere. For the cube itself, it has its own set of subdivision as well over here, as you can see, with height and depth. This tree value over here is the same thing as scaling x, y, and z. So please feel free to play around with the value over with this tree value, or you can actually modify your item with the universal scale x, y, z. Okay, let me set this one all to 2. All right, select the cube again and open up inputs, scroll. So over here you can see the same concept apply from the sphere can be applied onto the cube itself, where I can add more subdivision. I'm adding more. I'm adding like 6 subdivision for the width. Height, I can do the same thing as well. Mouse over and drag. Okay, as you can see, more faces for you to customize the shape. Okay, later I'll talk about it, where you want to customize, where you want to adjust the vertex, the edge, and the face of an object. Okay, so for the cylinder, you will have the same approach as well. Okay, you have their own individual value. So subdivision axis is the same as the sphere. All right, height, we can increase how many subdivision we want. Caps, control the caps, the radius around the top and bottom of the cylinder. Okay, for the rest is actually, well, it's actually the same. They have their own set of inputs, subdivision axis, height, and caps, the same thing. So I recommend you can go through this one by one, as each one of these, I'm not going to touch every single one of them because of their role is almost the same, just that it has different names in the end. Okay, so right now I'm going to talk about modifying the 3 components of the polygon. Okay, alright, from previous class you actually know how to select these 3 components for polygon. Right click, you can see edge, vertex, and face. Alright, let's add more subdivision for this cube first. So let's go back to object mode, polycube. Let's say around 4 by 4. Okay, so we divide the cube itself to 4 sections each. Alright, so okay, when it comes to modifying a polygon, we can actually manipulate every single vertex accordingly. As you may have remembered when I mentioned about on the Polygon Primitives, and I did mention about playing around with plasticine, right, or maybe some clay. Treat this as your own clay, where you're able to move the vertex accordingly to the shape you want to mold. Okay, as you can see, I'm just moving this around. All right, anyway, I'm just moving the vertex around. You can select multiple vertex, adjust the shape as you want to see fit. This is just something basic, right? When it comes to much more advanced approach, I'll cover that. I'll talk about that maybe one day. Okay, so I'm manipulating the vertices, and of course you can manipulate the faces. All right, as you can see, moving the face, positioning them accordingly. Even I can move one face, select 2 faces, move them. Either you want to move or scale, or you can rotate them individually. Alright, as you can see over here. Same goes for the vertex. We can rotate, sorry, this direction. Okay, rotate, scale, move, translate. For edges itself, you can move them as well. Basically, you actually moving the same thing as vertices. Okay, just that the selection is different. So this actually depends on your own preferences, whether you want to rely either on all 3 components to move your item, or you want to focus, you want to use one method only. This is up to you. Everyone has their own different preferences on how to move an item, but sometimes it's best to utilize all 3 or maybe 2 to move your polygon, to modify the shape of your polygon to what you want. Alright, as you can see. Next class, maybe I'm just going to talk, maybe for a few next classes, maybe we're going to mold Polygon Primitives to a shape that we want, perhaps one day. Okay, so let's forget about this. Alright, and next thing I would want to point out, well, we can add more subdivision by the default by the input box here, where we can see the width, height, and depth. But extrusion, okay, now let's talk about extrusion. Extrusion is actually extending the face of a polygon. Alright, as you can see, if I apply extrude, if I click on this icon over here, you can see extrude. It says extrude the selected component. Normally extrusion works best on faces. Mostly it works best on faces. So I just hit the extrude, can pull out, and you have two additional faces already. If you notice on to your right here, we can actually tweak around with the value of how thick the extrusion should be. You just mouse over, just select the attribute, and middle mouse, drag how far you want the extrusion to be. Offset, basically how sharp or wide the edge of the polygon you want. Division, this is the same as subdivision actually, where we can actually add additional division. Okay, this is the basic of how extrusion works. But of course, if you play around with if you double click over here, there are a lot of things you need to consider in the end, especially smoothing angle, offset. Okay, offset, thickness, and division, I find these three very important. Smoothing angle, not really that important. Curve setting, this one actually you can use a NURBS curve. Maybe one day we'll associate NURBS together with the extrusion here. Taper and twist, it's a little bit different. It works a little bit different here, but some of this function can be found under here, as you can see, but it's not doing anything at all. How about taper? Not doing anything at all, so never mind, forget about it. That one maybe in the future I might talk about that later. Alright, so essentially extrude is actually adding additional subdivision. Okay, and we can actually reduce the size of the extrusion, and of course if we hit extrude, we can scale the extrusion over here and pull. Okay, it's the same thing ever. So you hit extrude, you can adjust the thickness, middle mouse over the attribute, and offset and division. We will play with this function maybe few classes from now when we create something up from Maya. I'm just introducing this basic skill first because we may want to utilize a combination of a few tools to construct a 3D model. You're not going to rely on one, you might rely on 2, 3, or 4, or more, or maybe 10 to achieve your goal. Alright, so this is extrusion basically. So let's delete this item. Next one would be the final one of the day. If you know the word duplicate, duplicate is basically adding duplicating the exact copy of the item. If you notice in the page itself, duplicate, the icon is one, if I'm not mistaken, it's a D itself, but let me try to add it over here. Okay, yeah, sorry, it's this icon as you can see over here. So if I hit duplicate, there you go. Alright, normally duplication, you can see the effect of the duplication. You select an object, duplicate, you can see it is overlapping. Alright, it is overlapping. If you don't want to rely on these two that I just created, one common way, maybe two common ways how you want to find the duplicate function would be you go to edit, duplicate, and in Maya itself, whenever you see this command, this is actually the shortcut key of how to duplicate. So it says here Control D. So let's try to remember D is for duplicate. So we just press Control D. There we go. We have another copy, and also you can select multiple copies and duplicate. Okay. There is another one called duplicate special. Maybe I'll talk about that. This one is maybe it's a bit for advanced user, or maybe next tutorial I'll talk about this duplicate special. Okay, so hope this lesson is gets through you. Nothing difficult. You just need to realize how to modify the three components on your polygon primitive, how to extrude, and how to duplicate your polygon primitive. Hope you have fun. I'll see you on the next lessons. All right, thank you.